Hello everybody, happy Friday. Hope everybody's having a great week and excited for the weekend. Here in our neck of the woods, it's going to be nice this weekend. So it'll be nice to be able to get outside and do some things and get out from being cooped up. Doesn't mean it's not going to snow again, but at least we'll have a couple nice days here in a row. So I wanted this week to kind of continue on with what we started talking about last week, which was, homeowners insurance, and talk about renters and condo insurance, right? And kind of we've already talked about the differences, but in this instance, talk about like some coverages you can think about, what is in there, and look at it from a property perspective. We're not going to talk really about the liability portion. We'll do that later, kind of with all three together. But this just really talk about like the property and what you should be thinking about and things like that. So the reason that I chose to do these two together is we're predominantly worried about in both of them your property. And with a homeowners, we get personal property, but it's usually a number that's automatic based on the size of your house. So it's usually a percentage, whether it's 60 or 75%. So if your house is worth, cost to rebuild $100,000, we're going to give you 60 or 70,000 in contents and property coverage. In this instance, we pick that number, so we have to think about it, right? Like, okay, what do you have? And so that's where it becomes a little bit different than that policy, than a homeowner's policy, because we have to, think about what are we going to cover? What does that cost? What do we have? So, as always, when we talk about this, these are just some highlights and some thoughts. There's always more coverages, other things. If you have any other questions or anything like that, don't hesitate to hit me up on DM, give me a call, and talk about it. But so we're going to kind of, going to go through it. So with renters, right? First thing, the landlord owns the building and or the house or whatever it might be. So we're just covering your property, right? We're covering, think of anything that you're going to move in, anything you can pick up and move. So it's important to think about that. And if we look at this from like the beginning or the starting, so let's say you're moving out after college or with college or something like that, it's always a difficult thing to put a dollar amount on your stuff, right? Like, because maybe some of it isn't worth, as I do air quotes here, like the table you got might be just something somebody gave you or something like that. But God forbid something happens, we're going to replace that table, right? We're going to get you a new one. And so when we put that number together, it might not be a big number, but we want to think about, okay, what do we have, not just in stuff, meaning like clothes and a TV, but other things, right? Like a bed or a kitchen table or dishes and all that stuff. Like, what do you have and what would it cost, or what would we need, right? What would we need to do that? And then from there, once we have a basic idea of what you have, then we can throw out some numbers and kind of look at the difference. Is this an expensive coverage? No. $150 or $200 a year, depending, is usually what they cost. But yeah, so that's something, as we would go into this, really important to think about. Also, a coverage that's often overlooked is on your renter's policy will be loss of use. What that means is, God forbid something should happen to your house, your apartment, wherever you're living. Let's say there's a fire or there's a storm and something happens, pipe burst. You can't live there while the landlord's insurance company is fixing the house. Well, that portion of your policy is not only going to fix any property that might have been damaged, but it's also going to put you up in somewhere in the short term while that is getting fixed. So in some instances that could be important, right? Not only are we going to replace your stuff, but we're going to make sure that you have a place to live while the house is getting fixed. As we would talk about a condo policy, and this is kind of where the difference is, there is a little bit of building coverage as it would pertain to that policy. And as we said last week, your association, your condo association, is covering the structure itself. So we're more worried about from the walls in, right? So as we would talk about this, first off, it is super important to understand what is your responsibility and what is the responsibility of the association, right? There's all different types of lingo and verbiage within your covenants that would be important to look at. So as if you're buying a condo or you're living in one now and you're not sure how much you should have, look at that. I've come across some that you are literally responsible for anything drywall in, right? So that could be the cabinets, the countertops, all of that stuff, right? Fixtures, things of that nature. Or it could be where we're going to put, the association puts it back to the way it was, like you're responsible for any upgrades you might have done, right? So if you put different carpeting in, or you put hardwood in instead of carpeting or something like that. So it's important that you have a basic idea of what you're responsible for so that we know how much building coverage that we need to add. Because again, just like we pick the personal property, we can pick the amount of building coverage that I'm going to put it we need, right? So if that is from the drywall in, so that's everything, that might be a little more than or a lot more if we just have to do anything that is extra or something like that, right? So from there, personal property works exactly the same way. We're going to pick out a personal property amount and we're going to insure it for whatever that is. And then the same thing, loss of use. We are going, God forbid something should happen, we are going to find you a place to live while it is being fixed, right? If it is uninhabitable, right? And that could be for, 2 weeks. That could be for 2 or 3 months or 6 months or whatever that is included in there, right? Couple things that I also kind of want to talk about as we talk about coverages. So we've talked about that. Okay, how the dollar amount, and more than anything, I can't answer that, and my questions often are open-ended. So like, hey, what do you have? Kind of get it down on a sheet of paper and let's think about it and think about some bigger ticket items. But also too, when we're talking about coverages, we want to make sure that your property is covered, your personal property is covered for replacement cost and not actual cash value. And what that means is that we are going to replace the item that we are covering. So whether it was damaged, it was damaged, it was stolen, it was, whatever, we're going to replace it. And so what that is meaning, like, easiest one I give example is on a TV, right? You bought a TV 3 years ago, right? And that TV was $100, right? We're going to use round numbers. And it's been 3 years. So if we were to actual cash value that, they might say, okay, we're going to take $10 per year or whatever it might be, and hey, we're going to give you $70 for that, for that TV. You are not only have your deductible that you might have, but then you're going to replace the rest because you've used it, so it's what it's actually actual cash value. Replacement cost is important in this because we're just going to replace it. So whatever that like TV cost, you are going to go buy it and we're going to replace it for that. So if it's $110 today, then we're going to replace it for $110, right? So that is super duper important. The other thing is to also look at other things that you might have, right? So jewelry or collectibles or sporting equipment is no secret to anybody that's watching. I'm a golfer, so like I have golf equipment. We can schedule that stuff and the coverage will be broader and better depending on what you have, as there's also some certain limits to like how much jewelry that you can have on a policy until you schedule it. So that's also something else as you're sitting down thinking about this. What do you have that is maybe, we're going to call it specialized, that we should schedule out separately? That is often very inexpensive coverage as well. It might be $7 or $8 per thousand to cover something like that. And that's, again, just sit with yourself, have a chat with yourself and say, okay, what do we have? And then sit with someone, me preferably, and chat about it, and then we can guide you in the direction in which you should go on any of that. Sometimes is it worth it, sometimes it's not. It all depends on the person, right? So, and then from there, obviously, last thing is to talk about a deductible. And this is in every insurance policy. What are you comfortable paying out of pocket? So basically look at that as, okay, if that TV was $100 and my deductible was $50, or let's use $1,000 and $500, we're gonna pay $500. You're gonna pay $500. Obviously, the higher your deductible, the lower your premium is. So it's obviously looking at risk and what risk is involved in that. So, and what risk you're willing to take, like we talked about. So yeah, so from there, I hope that makes some sense, and I hope that maybe gives you something to think about. If you have any questions, or there's anything else you want to talk about as it pertains to this, like I said, this is not an all-encompassing amount of coverage. Those are just a couple things I really wanted to point out today in this, like, really have to think about, okay, how much property I have, and not only what was the cost to me now, but what would be the cost to me to replace it, right? You know, obviously, if you've had stuff given to you as you've started out or things like that, but now we're going to replace that. What is that worth, and what does that cost? And obviously, it isn't very much to insure things when we talk about that. So yeah. So again, if you have any questions or comments, please hit me up. And I hope everybody has a great weekend. And I will talk to you next week.